Hello and welcome. My name is Megan Porter. I am Vice President of the Big Sky Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here to welcome you today to Business in Big Sky, Property Tax 101. As you can tell by the turnout in this room, property tax is one of the biggest issues facing Montanans right now. It impacts us as homeowners, as business owners, and it's really, truly shaping this community's future. At the Chamber, our mission is to empower our members with resources, connections, and to be responsive to these business issues, championing the vitality of this community. Hosting this program is part of that mission. So thank you for being here. Tonight we have 3 speakers. I would like to welcome Brendan Beatty, Director of the Montana Department of Revenue. We also have Paula Gilbert, Administrator of the Property Assessment Division. And finally, our Big Sky local, John Zirkle, who will be facilitating our evening. As you listen, I encourage you to think about how state policy really impacts Big Sky. We'll save time at the end for questions, so please hold until then. If you are online, I apologize, we don't have a chat feature. Thank you for being here tonight, and if you have questions, please email them to info@bigskychamber.com. Tonight is all about learning and engaging together as a community, and with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks to the Big Sky Chamber. I'm John Zirkle. Welcome to tonight. This question has been on my mind for the last few years, certainly. But before we get into this and dive in, I want to do a really simple mic check. So those of you in the back, can you hear me clearly if I speak relaxed tone? Perfect. Can everybody see the screen? Great, because we're going to be doing math tonight, and we want to make sure that everybody can hear and we're good online. We can hear. Perfect. Okay. So I'm John Zirkle. I'm on the board of the Big Sky Resort Area District Resort Tax. I'm also grateful to be a property owner here in Big Sky local. And I have been paying attention, like all of you, over the last 5 years in particular, to what's been happening in Big Sky. And I'm grateful that tonight we get to have a good conversation about this. And we're going to learn a lot. And we've got the pros, we've got the experts here with us tonight. And before we introduce everyone, there's a simple answer to this question. I'm checking to see if the clicker works. You knew that was going to happen. It's fun. Paul, I remember we talked about this 2 minutes ago, that this was going to happen. There's the answer. Yes. Are taxes going up or down for me? The answer, yes. And we're going to dive into this tonight. And here's who's in the room. Let's go back here. Here's who's in the room. So we have the director of the Department of Revenue, and we have the director of property assessment for the Montana Department of Revenue. We'd like to bring them up now. Brendan Beatty, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks, John. Maybe. Thanks. There we go. Usually I don't need a microphone, but I'll use it anyway. Thanks, John, for the introduction, and thank everybody in the room for coming and listening and talking with us tonight. Believe it or not, as director of the Department of Revenue, this is the best part of my job. And I'm looking forward to a really good conversation. Before we dig into the meat of this thing, I want to introduce myself, let you know who I am and how I got here, and I'll introduce Paula. So I was appointed director of the Department of Revenue by Governor Gianforte when he started his administration. 4th generation Montana rancher in eastern Montana. Got a law degree from the University of Montana, and I was fortunate enough for 26 years to be one of the original remote workers, where I was actually an assistant attorney general working for the state, representing the Montana Department of Revenue in tax litigation. So I know a little bit about the law, and I know a little bit about how this stuff works. And I was minding my own business one day with 26 years of that into it, and this new governor-elect guy who I didn't even know called me up and asked me if I'd be the director. I told him no 4 times, and here I am. Apparently you don't get to be a successful guy by taking no for an answer, but I think I should have said no for a 5th. it's actually been really rewarding and it's been great. We came and I came to change the Department of Revenue and we're doing it. And one of the pivotal actors in changing the Department of Revenue to be what our mission is the nation's most citizen-oriented tax agency was I changed the management structure entirely for the department. And I brought people in who shared my belief that we work for the taxpayer, not the other way around. And that was a big change that I've watched evolve in the Department of Revenue for the prior 20 years. One of the great hires and one of the best government employees you will ever meet that I have the pleasure to work with is Paula Gilbert. She's the division administrator of our property assessment division. Department of Revenue has 675 employees that report to me. 280 of them are hers. 280 people are property assessment. They appraise every 2 years, every parcel in Montana. They appraise every year, every piece of industrial property in Montana. And we appraise the big utilities every other year. All of them report to Paula. She's a native of Billings, Montana. And one of the things I did when I changed this was I took people from the field and moved them to the high office instead of the inbred bureaucratic bullshit that goes with inside trading. And so all of a sudden you had all these people trying to run policy and run management without knowing how to do a damn appraisal. Well, we changed that. Paula is an expert in residential appraisal, ag appraisal, commercial appraisal, in the modeling we use for our computer assisted mass appraisal. And she shares my vision of we work for you, not the other way around. But I've got an expert here and she is really, really good and she's committed to working for you. So with that, also, I am a taxpayer in Madison County. I own a Black Eagle, turned out to be a pretty dang good investment. But it went up. And yes, I'm gonna pay more taxes in Madison County. I own a ranch in Petroleum County, Montana, which has the lowest population of any county in the lower 48 states. And the tax shift with the new legislation, I'm gonna pay more taxes. So one of the things people forget is we are you. I mean, just because I have this job doesn't mean I am not feeling the same pinch that everybody else is. And so I pay pretty close attention. So in this job, now we'll move into how we got here. There's a lot of politics around this, and frankly, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation about what's going on with Montana's property tax system. But to really understand it, and what you get from me, by the way, is no bullshit. I will tell you the truth, even if it hurts. I will tell you the non-politically correct answer if I think it's the truth. And I'm never running for an office, nor do I ever care to. So ask the question, I will give you the answer. So you look at how did we get here? I mean, residential property taxes are going up. Everybody would agree with that, right? And it's statewide. Doesn't matter if it's in Petroleum County, Montana, or Madison County. Well, there's a reason for that. And what you'll see, the politicians tell you, hey, look, residential property is carrying a greater and greater percentage of the overall property tax burden since the 70s. Yeah, it is. Let me tell you why. So we had a constitution in 1889 that sort of worked, sort of didn't, especially as property assessment went. And up until 1972, when we had the new constitution, we were locally assessed by county assessors. And it turns out, if you can believe this, Montana had corruption. And the local elected county assessor liked John, so John got a break, but didn't like Megan. Megan got the short end. So they changed that in 1972. And they basically rewrote how we do everything in Montana from 1889. And they came to the conclusion that the best way to fund local government was with property taxes. But they didn't like the county assessor thing. So they created the Montana Department of Revenue. So every property in Montana is appraised and assessed centrally by the Department of Revenue. They took the local politics out of the gig, right? And it works pretty dang well. Also, what happened in 1972, by the way, I was 5. I didn't have gray hair then. In 1972, it was a different Montana. The Montana I live in now is basically unrecognizable to the Montana I remember as a kid, clear through high school. But that doesn't make it bad, it just makes it different. Well, how were we different? Well, when they decided they were gonna fund local government with property taxes, we had 700,000 people in the state of Montana, evenly spread from the North Dakota, South Dakota line to the Idaho line, and from the Canadian border to Wyoming. We were heavily natural resource and ag economy, heavily weighted that way. We had gold mines, we had coal mines, we had big oil fields. We had much bigger ag presence. We had pipelines. We had a utility that incidentally the state of Montana was named after, called Montana Power Company. Anybody from Montana might remember that. So they put property taxes on all them, and they put big property taxes on all these big industries. Well, what did that do? You still have residential property tax, but basically these big industries that demanded very little service, like cops, schools, firemen, whatever, they subsidized my life growing up in my parents' home with the property taxes. They funded the schools. And a great example of that I saw was the Montana Tunnels gold mine outside of Clancy, Montana. Demanded very few services, right? It's a hole in the wall with a bunch of people working there. It was 75% of Clancy's budget, tax base. Okay, it's gone. Oh yeah, by the way, we had 42 sawmills. There's 6 now. Oh, 5. The pyramid just closed. Every one of those sawmills paid a much higher tax rate than residences. The mines paid. All of these heavy industries paid. Now, when the Conservation Reserve Program came in the 80s, and it took almost 5 million acres of grain production land out of production and seeded back to grass. The town in central Montana that I went to school had a farm implement dealership on either end of town. Every storefront up and down Main Street Shelby had a commercial business in it that was selling stuff and paying taxes. Within 2 years of CRP coming in, both implement dealerships were gone and half the stores were closed. But the bills are still there. The property tax got pushed onto my parents' home, right? So that continues to this day. But now what you see residential property taxes picking up a greater percentage of the tax burden for 2 reasons. One, there's less and less of the big industries that pick that up. They deregulated the Montana Power Company, and it took a huge amount of value out of Montana because it reduced the tax rate from 12% on all those pipelines to 3%. Whitewater Schools basically went dead. There was Whitewater Schools that was the tax base, was a pipeline. But what was left, they had to push off onto the farmhouse or the storefront or the bar in the little town, right? That's how we got. Now, we've also added 400,000 people since the Constitution started. And then we crammed most of them into the western third of the state. And here we sit. Now, as we crammed that big number into the western part of the state, we started to drive values up, right? And that's what we're seeing here. Supply and demand. I'm in the cow-calf business. I can tell you all about supply and demand. I've seen up and down simply by supply and demand, and real estate's no different. So that's how we got where we got. So don't buy the political jive about, oh, this is all being pushed on to residences. They're actually carrying more of it because there's more of them and less of anybody else to carry. Fixing the property tax problem. I mean, I pay a lot of property taxes. I'm the second largest property taxpayer in the county. And I pay a lot of property taxes here, but the mills are a lot lower than that. How do we fix that? The only way you can fix it is you decide you want fewer services or find new money. Because otherwise, service demand is like squeezing a balloon. If the budget is $1 million and we squeeze it off my house, but that $1 million is still in the balloon, where's it gonna go? It goes to somewhere else. We call it a tax shift, right? And that's what this past legislation was trying to fix or change or something. And that's where we sit from a reality standpoint is I am very pro Big Sky. I love Big Sky. I got a place up here. The gold mines are gone. The places like Big Sky are the gold mine. I don't want to kill it. this is a huge revenue generator for the state. It's like 5% of the state's gross domestic product. The values here are huge, and a whole bunch of people, it's not just a bunch of houses, it's a bunch of people making a living. And we need to keep that, and we need to not kill the golden goose here, because this is one of the last gold mines left to help fund things. So that's my view of it from the history and how we got here. So after I took this job, turns out I had to administer 40 Montana taxes and fees. And the law requires Paula and I to value all the property in Montana, virtually all property in Montana at 100% market value. So that's what we do so far. So Paula is in charge of making sure 850 some odd thousand parcels are at 100% of market value. This year, it's as of July or January 1 of 2024. That's another one of these political misconceptions you will hear. Is when we do this, it's not the market value today, the day you got your assessment notice. It was actually a year and a half prior. That's how this works. Excellent. So as the Department of Revenue does this is what I get to do every day. And we see there's two ways to do things. There's local taxes in Montana, and we talked about that. It's funded by property taxes. 90, as John's phenomenal slide shows that he stole from the Department of Revenue, 96.1 of your local taxes are property taxes. And then there's miscellaneous other stuff. As you can see, income tax is the big driver for the state. One of the misconceptions you will hear that I am here to debunk is not a dime of your property taxes goes to fund state services. You hear people talk about state mills. There's the 95 mills for school equalization, the 6 mills for the university and the community college. They call them the state mills because they get remitted to me. And then I give it to the Office of Public Instruction, who then does this crazy math, and they take all of that money and redistribute it out to equalize school funding statewide. So what you hear is, I hear a lot of it is the state is taking all this money. Actually, we're not. I'm the money launderer for school equalization. So I know a couple of years ago, Madison County's, like we were talking about the gold mine, Madison County collected $19 million of school equalization funds and sent $18 million of those of that money to other schools in the state to help fund education in less fortunate taxing jurisdictions. So every dime you pay here goes to local services and schools. There's nothing, my salary is not paid by your property taxes, I promise. So we're mostly income tax, and the legislature spends most of its time worrying about the general fund and the state taxes. That's why property taxes kind of get this sort of second shrift, because they get to go back and say they balance the budget, but they let the counties and the schools to deal. So that's kind of what you see there is our breakdown on property, on the breakdown on taxes. John put this together really well, and it really does show nothing ever stays the same. But what it does show, if you look at the blue line, it's kind of in the middle of the graph, residential property tax rates have been on the decline, fairly continual decline, since I was in 6th grade. And the tax rate, of course, matters because that's what you use to calculate how much you pay. So residential tax rates have dropped a great deal. And that has helped the overall tax burden for the residents. But again, you can only drop them so far because that's all that's left to pay the bill in a lot of places. So now you get John, right? Or Paula.
I think we're all gonna play in this next.
Oh, okay.
section. Thank you, Director Beatty. We're on section 2 of 3. Sorry, I ripped through the slide earlier, but after this, we're gonna have some really good conversation. Hopefully you'll indulge me in some activities so everybody gets to talk, and then I'll walk you through that when we get there. So thanks so much for your attention. I'm going to talk about some local analysis. I saw some people brought pens and notepads. This will be that moment. We're going to look at a lot of graphs. We're going to look at a lot of percentages, and we're going to look at Annie's computer too for the moment.
Having some technical
Gotcha.
issues for discussion.
And then we're really excited to hear from Paula in a little bit about the appraisal process, which I know a lot of people in this room are going to be really interested to hear, and we're grateful for that. time. So when we talk about big sky, and I have this conversation a lot at dinner tables and parties that I'm at, it's really hard to define. So let's actually, I want to take a moment now, while we're dealing with technical difficulties. This is one way to look at big sky, but check in with your neighbor and see if you can figure out where is the northbound entrance to big sky, where is the westbound entrance, where's the southern tip of big sky, and where's the eastern side of big sky. I'm really curious to hear what that looks like in here. Take a minute and actually check in with your neighbor because we're having a neighborhood conversation. I'll check back in 60 seconds. Go ahead. Let's say I'm 191, like where does big sky stop? Karst, I heard Dudley Creek, you would say Dudley? Dudley, Karst, okay, great. What did we say, westbound? Just throw it out there. What's that, Ennis? High Mason? Fan Mountain, that's interesting. Top of the mountain, okay, all right, and then how about south? Around, interesting, someone said that in the community, so like 320, Yellowstone, I don't know, is that too hard? West Yellowstone, interesting, thanks for it. And then east, this is the hardest one, I'm like, I don't even, the river, okay, cool. So when we try and define big sky, this is the feeling, whatever you're experiencing right now, is the feeling I get when I try to describe big sky, which is 7,500 properties about, 2 counties, 12 districts, 0 cities, and by the way, every district is drawn different. So for example, the Big Sky School District goes all the way down to the, I think the Black Butte Ranch is actually in the Big Sky School District, all the way up to Storm Castle. You know, when we look at Madison County and we think about the water and sewer district, there's, you know, this like funky like inverted cross thing here. And then when we think about the fire district, it's got this kind of wacky zigzag bisection up here. This challenge of defining big sky, what is it, makes this conversation difficult. It makes this conversation about what's happening in big sky and how do we aggregate data very challenging and very complicated, which is why there isn't a ton of data out there. Tell you that Jackie Haynes is doing some amazing work at Resort Tax to try and look. Oh, by the way, public service announcement. Jackie Haynes and Michelle Konjorski are around to talk about the new petition for a potential new hospital district in Big Sky, the Gallatin County Hospital District. So if you want to learn more and you are considering signing that petition, you can talk to Jackie and Michelle at the back. You have to be a resident of Gallatin County and a property owner, is that right? And a registered voter, cool. Thanks, I promised to do that. So I will say though, when we talk about Big Sky, one of the most helpful perimeters is this big kind of like reverse Montana looking shape, which is, it goes left almost down to the reserve Moonlight Golf Course, way over past Levinsky Ridge. This is actually a drainage. The drainage comes down into the Gallatin. Everything to the east of this line goes down to the Yellowstone. And then down south, this is way down past Beaver Creek, and north is about Karst. So when we talk about Big Sky tonight, that's what I'm talking about. I understand that other people might have different definitions, but for the property tax conversation, we're talking about all of the property within this outermost district. Biggest challenge we're going to go through tonight is the 2 county thing. People on the Madison County side, and the Gallatin County side. That's where the most dramatic differences happen. So we're gonna do some math now. And I have struggled through this. Has anybody struggled with doing their property tax math? Okay, only Linda now. Okay, cool. Great. Well, I'll rip through this if everybody gets it really quick. So, and Paula, you correct me if I make a mistake here. We went through it earlier, but I'm doing math in public, so that's a thing. Here's how we get to taxes paid. It's the taxable value of your property, not the market value of your property, times the assessed mills. And by the way, assessed mills are going to be different for a lot of different properties in Big Sky. So if I live here in the town center area, I see that I'm in the water and sewer district, I'm in the fire district. If I'm in Dudley Creek, I'm outside of the fire district. If I'm over up in Moonlight, I might be in a whole other county. And those mills reflect where you are geographically. So everybody's bill is going to look different. So with that, you might say, well, what is taxable value? The first part of the equation. And I'm about to spend, hopefully not all night, on the left side of this equation. But as we go through all this data, some of it is pretty stark. It's important to remember that this is a really critical part of the conversation, and we don't know this number right now, which is a tough place to be, but we're going to try to guess at it by the end of the night. So what is taxable value? It's the left side of that equation. This is in pictures. I'm a teacher at the school. I have to think about differentiated learning here. We're going to go into the left side. Okay. Taxable value is the market value of your home, which is given to us by the Department of Revenue, multiplied by the tax rate, which is determined by the legislature. The Department of Revenue sets that, the legislature sets the tax rate. So when you think about who do I need to talk to, say I disagree about my market value, we know who to talk to. If I don't like the tax rate, we know who to talk to. Sometimes we don't like this and we call them, or our friend who sent us an email. The next one, which is hard, and Carol Collins was like, oh man, mills. Does anyone feel like they really have a mastery of mills? I've spent all summer on this. It's challenging. But let's get after it. Let's try to understand what a mill is. A mill is equal to 0.1%. Think about Latin mill, 1/1000th, or 0.1%. Why is this difficult? Because we don't think in thousandths, we think in hundredths usually. We learned that in third grade about percentages. How do we figure out how to think on base 100? And this is usually where we get lost in the equation. So an example, if I have 300 mills at the bottom of my tax bill, that means 300 out of 1,000, which is 30%, times our taxable value. How does the taxing district raise money? We have a lot of them. We saw that slide before. Let's say a local fire department, big theoretical thing here. We're not talking about Big Sky Fire Department or anything else. Let's say they need $1 million. They divide that need by all of the taxable value within that district to get a district bill assessment. Paula, how'd I do? In this case, $1 million, let's say a fire engine. They need to buy a fire engine on a $100 million base. They need to charge 10 mills, which is 10/1000ths, aka 1/100. Then we add everything up. It's important. I'm really grateful to Director Beatty that conversation about state mills because it's confusing. The state throws all that out. So it's important to think about when we're talking about property tax, to really just think schools. Schools one of the most complicated. It's got a county level, state level, and a local level. Then we have other county mills like roads and public safety, nursing homes, and other local mills, fire, water, and sewer, and hospitals. One thing I'm leaving out of this in the Big Sky equation is there is no city of Big Sky. If we were living in a city, we'd probably see a lot more mills because they would be thrown into this equation as well. And again, this little note, that's why everybody's bill looks different. Okay, so there's our assessed mills. We're starting to come together to see how the equation gets calculated. So to go back to our initial conversation, taxable value, which is our appraised value times the tax rate. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Times the assessed mills, and then this is always the big thing, is when do I divide by 1,000? Gets us the taxes. Here's an example of what that might look like. Taxable value on our home, 15,000. Let's say that's 1 to 2% of our home. Times 300 mills gets us $4,500. In this case, we're paying 30% of our taxable value. Are we all there? Great. Kind of there. We're getting there.
A fine math class.
What's that?
Very fine math class.
Excellent, okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, this is where I'm gonna take a pause, making sure we get it, because we're gonna get into some data after this. We're gonna turn it over to the amazing Paula Gilbert to talk about the market appraisal process, which is the furthest left side of the equation. That's before we even get to the tax rates. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John, I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for being here. It's so important that you understand how property taxes work and where we come up with our values. Nobody likes paying property taxes, but if you understand it, hopefully that will make it a little bit easier to swallow. So, as Brendan said, the property assessment division, we have about 286 employees in my division right now. And what we do is appraise all of the properties in the state of Montana, and as Brendan said, that's over 800,000 properties right now. If you remember back in, I believe it was 2015 is when we switched. We used to be on a 6-year tax cycle. We are now on a 2-year tax cycle, which means that we reassess everybody's values every 2 years. So the people in my department, there's a couple of things that we do. I don't want to get into the weeds, but I want to make sure that you understand what it is that we do. So a typical day, we have appraisers in the department that are out, and they are out in your communities, out in your towns, and they're reviewing properties. So we get building permits, electrical permits. We review every sale that comes into our office. When a property sells, Montana is a non-disclosure state, which means that the sale price is confidential. However, the department gets what's called a realty transfer certificate that gives us the purchase price of that property. It's really important that we have that because, again, your values are going to be set using sales. So our appraisers are out and they're making sure that your property characteristics are correct. So they go out and they review your property. We do show up unannounced because we have 80,000 properties. So when we're in an area, we're trying to hit as many as we can. Because we don't have enough people to be doing this all day, every day, and hitting every single property. So we show up at the property. If you recently purchased your house, you're going to receive what's called a sales verification letter in the mail. And I just want to talk about that for a minute. We've heard over the years, there's realtors and title companies that will tell you, do not tell them anything. Do not give information because your taxes will go up. So I want to dispel that myth as well. That information is vital in making sure that your property value is appropriate. We're not getting into your house. We don't have the ability to do this. We're relying on making sure that the characteristics on your property are correct. If they're correct, then we can apply an appropriate value. If they're not correct, then your value may likely not be appropriate. Now, in some cases, you're going to say, well, that's great because they don't know my basement's finished. The problem with that is if every one of you isn't paying your portion of the property tax, it's just shifting onto somebody else. And so while it's great for you at this point, in the long run, it's not helping anybody. So I just encourage you to give us the information. We are not trying to be in your business. We have no interest in that information other than that's how we build our models to place a value on your property. So we want to make sure that the characteristics are correct. We also we're picking up new construction. So if somebody starts building a new house, we want to get out there. We want to make sure that our measurements are correct. Again, we want to get the characteristics right so that your taxes, which are based on your value, is going to be appropriate for your property. So the way that we come up with your property values. So as they said, the assessment date for this tax cycle is January 1st of 2024. So in 27 and 28, the assessment date will be 1/1 of 26. That's really important because like Brendan said, what we're hearing across the state is in the higher end areas, we are seeing slowing, the market seems to be slowing, we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in areas. That will be reflected in the next tax cycle. Right now, we're bound by statute with that 1/1 of 24 days. So that means that what we did as a department was we collected sales. So every sale that occurred throughout the state, what we're going through is we have the sales prices. We're making sure that the characteristics are correct. And basically what we're doing is putting all of those sales into a database. And so the other important thing to remember here is that they have to be valid sales. So if you sell your property to your grandson for, a third of what the market would command, that's not good information for us. We're tasked with valuing at 100% of market value. So there's a lot of work that goes into the appraisal. We have to make sure that our information is correct. We want to make sure that it's a realistic sales price and it accurately reflects what the market is doing. So for this tax cycle, sales it depends on where you're at, but we used sales, typically the most recent. If we have a lot of sales, we're going to use sales that occurred in 2022 and 2023. So we take all of those sales and we put them into a database. And then throughout the state, we have the 56 counties, and within the 56 counties, we're breaking those down into what we call neighborhoods. Very similar to what your realtors do. They say, well, this is the northwest part of town, or this is the south side of town. We do the same thing. So what we're looking for is properties that are similar in characteristics, similar in location, similar in amenities. And we're grouping those together because that's what's going to give us the best value of what your property is worth, is by looking at sales that occurred in your area and comparing those to your property. So again, we build all these sales and create this database, and then within each office, within each county, we have modelers, we have managers, we have appraisers that are working on compiling the information, and we create mass appraisal models. We are not fee appraisers. We do not look at every property individually for obvious reasons. We don't have time to do that. But again, what we do is make sure that all of those sales, if you've purchased a house, if you've sold your house, those are the prices that are going in to the models. And so if we're valuing you using the comparable sales method, which is the preferred method for residential property, we can value you using a cost approach or comparable sales. Comparable sales is basically the same thing that a fee appraiser does. We're just looking for properties in your vicinity with similar characteristics. We adjust for the differences. So we're never gonna, it's hard to find a house that's exactly like yours. But what we do is through our computer system is in this database, it's gonna take the characteristics of your property, and it's going to find 3 to 5 other properties that sold in the time period for the current tax cycle. And then what we do is we account for those differences. So if the comparable property number 1 sold for $300,000, but it's got 1,000 square feet more of living area, well, then that price, it wouldn't have sold for $300,000 because the subject property is smaller. So we're going to account for that difference. So basically what we do is go in and add or subtract for the differences in the characteristics of your property versus the comparable sales. And that's where we arrive at the market value. Now there are occasions where we use what's called the cost approach. In the state of Montana, we build cost tables again as a whole in the state, using Marshall and Swift valuation manual, MS means, and we build cost tables that apply to the entire state. So regardless of where you're at, those costs are similar. Now, we will break those down to apply your local costs, because we know that it's more expensive to get materials, things like that, if you're on top of the mountain, than if it is when you're sitting in the middle of buildings. So there are adjustments for that. Again, we typically use comparable sales. If we use the cost approach, there's a couple of reasons why we do that. One of them is because the property is so unique that it's very difficult to find comparable properties. So if we have, I'm from Billings, if any of you are familiar with the castle, this is an insane property that has a fascinating history to it. We can't find comparable properties to say, oh gosh, this is close to that. We look at the cost approach on a property like that. Statutorily, if your house is under construction, so if it's a percent complete, we must use the cost approach. We will switch to comparable sales most likely once that house is 100% complete. If you have qualified ag land or non-qual ag land, we'll use the cost approach. Again, that's really for a limited number of properties, specifically for residential, for the residences. So what you all just received in the mail was your appraisal notice. And that is the value that we placed on that for the current tax cycle, 25 and 26. That value will remain the same so long as there are no changes to your property. So if you take out a building permit and add an addition, we're gonna pick that up again for next year. So the way that it works is whatever's sitting on your property on January 1st of each year is what you're taxed on. So if you build your house and you complete it on December 31st, it's 100% taxable for the following year. If you start construction on January 2nd, you will not be taxed on that. It'll just probably be the land that you'll be taxed on until the following year. So however that sits, if your house is 50% complete on January 1st, you're taxed as a 50% complete property. Okay? Does that, let me talk about really quick. So again, everybody received their assessment notice. What's important to take into consideration here is the value, because that's what the department, that's what we're tasked with, is setting it at 100% of market value. Take a look at the value. If you truly feel that you could not have sold your house for that price on January 1st of 2024, I encourage you to file the AB 26 form, which is the informal review. What that does is it alerts us, our local offices, our local appraisers, they're gonna contact you and they're gonna wanna come out and review your property. You do not need to let them into your house. We do all of our reviews from the exterior. However, I will tell you that there are times when we may ask to do an interior review of your property. So if we show up and you say, my basement's completely unfinished, it's not that we don't want to believe you. It's just that we've been lied to a time or two in the past. We would love to just see it. You don't have to let us in, even if you take a picture and send it to us. We want to work with you. We're not trying to invade anybody's privacy. We're just trying to make sure that the information is accurate. And so, yes.
What is the full living set?
Oh yeah, it's called an AB 26 form. And it's the informal classification and review form. And Megan can put that on the website too. We can send out information on that as well. That deadline is coming up, I believe it's August 25th. Don't miss that deadline. If you do, your appeal will be valid for 2026. So I don't want to get into the weeds too much more. I hope that that was an overall gave you an overall understanding of the way that this works. Again, we'll be here, so if you have further questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Good, and that's great. We love the questions you're getting asked. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions after Paula's just gave us all that amazing information. Hang on to those. We're gonna have a great conversation a little bit down the road tonight. I think we're scheduled till 8, but we're gonna be done way before that, so we can have some good conversation.
John, is it okay if I add just one little thing to the AB 26 process? One of the changes we made was, I hate calling it an appeal, right? Because this is a computer assisted mass appraisal system. So the AB 26 to me, and it's how we talk to our people, it's a clarification. We make mistakes. This is, it's computer assisted, but anybody ever heard the word garbage in, garbage out? If we put garbage in the input side of that thing, garbage comes out the other side, and I've seen some doozies, right? somebody gets an appraisal and it turns out the Department of Revenue thinks they have a 12,000 square foot deck. Well, actually, it's not a 12,000 square foot deck, it's a 120 square foot deck. Somebody hit 2 more zeros. If you didn't fill out the AB 26, we wouldn't know that we messed it up somehow. Or, 45 bathrooms instead of 4.5. I mean, you go down the list of horribles because it's really a data input piece that we will have mistakes on. That's why we're encouraging you to look at that, make sure you think it's cool. If I know nobody likes the higher value, I certainly didn't like mine going up 25% up the hill here. But I also looked at the value, I looked at the numbers and said, all those people got it right. The other thing about the AB 26, and I want to emphasize this, and this is the thing I didn't talk about when I was talking about the Constitution. In 1972, when they wrote the Constitution, they very specifically built the tax appeal process to be citizen friendly. It was built and designed to not have to make you go out and hire a lawyer to go mess around with the Department of Revenue. So you can hire a lawyer if you want, knock your socks off. But this thing was designed from the ground up for the citizen to be able to go in and deal with their government on a one-to-one. That's at the AB 26 level. That's also at the county tax appeal board level. If you get to the county tax appeal board level, all of that, they're not legal proceedings. They're not court judicial proceedings. They're informal fact-finding things that should be very non-threatening. I mean, I don't know, county tax appeal boards are very non-threatening. The AB 26 process damn near better not be threatening, or I will fire whoever's making it threat. Because this is supposed to be citizen friendly and we're supposed to be just getting it right. Oh, I do not care, nor does Paula, about the right-hand side of John's equation. Because if we did the stuff right on the left-hand side, the number is what it is. We're not in the business of maximizing value here. We're in the business of finding 100%. So the system was designed to be citizen friendly. It actually is very citizen friendly. And I think the last numbers I saw, less than 1% of the AB 26 was filed last go around, went past the county tax appeal board. That's how many get resolved at the AB 26 level, right? Because most of the time it's a fact issue. It's like, dude, I don't have a 12,000 square foot deck. Or, well, yeah, I know my neighbor sold for such and such, and mine should be that. Well, you come in and we show you the comps, and you go, oh, turns out the neighbor didn't tell you the right number. And you go, oh, okay. And anybody believe that had happened? So there's a lot of reasons. That's why 99% of these things never make it to any kind of judicial proceeding, right? So don't feel like you gotta hire a lawyer. If you want to, go for it. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. Might depend on the lawyer.
If the market values go up, okay. Should, by definition, the village rate go down?
We're gonna get into this.
I mean,
Your answer is yes, but I'll hit that in detail shortly, okay?
because that's what scared me. You tell us talk about it, but it really didn't tell us anything, because that's just a big question mark. And if it's the same millage rate with those great values, property taxes
That's
go up.
okay.
We're gonna hold off and we'll talk about that later.
This is a really important part of the night, which is why I know we're gonna ask it, we're about to go into it, to exactly what you're talking about, sir.
Yeah, I'm less interested in 1972 than what happened in 2022, when my taxes go.
Great. We're gonna go into all of this, and there's gonna be a moment for everyone to weigh in.
Okay.
Soon.
And sorry to waste your time.
Well, I know.
No,
It's
but
good stuff,
we'll
but
get there.
that's not why we're here.
We'll get there.
Can I just say one thing too? If you go to myproperty.mt.gov, you can see all the characteristics on your property. That's a great starting point. Go on there. You could look at your neighbor's property. All of that information is public information. But please go through there and make sure that what we have on your property record is correct. If it's not, we really do want to know. So I encourage you to reach out. It's myproperty.mt.gov. Or you can just Google Montana Cadastral, and you can also search, you can search by owner's name, address, any of those things, and I can get that information again to Megan so that we can get that out to you.
Okay, thank you for the energy. Let's keep rolling. So we're gonna get to the millage rate, which I know everyone wants to know. We're still on the left side of the equation, so summary, back to math class. What Paula just walked us through is that appraised value market rates went way up from 2022 to 2024. We all saw that happen. We saw it happen in 2023. We saw it happen again here. This latest legislative session changed the tax rates, which I know we're all focused on. Before, for residential, we were seeing rates of between 1.35% and 1.89%. Now, the 1.89%, for those of you who are paying close attention, is sometimes tricky to find because it was only on the value of the building over $1.5 million, which turns out is quite a few properties in Big Sky. So you might have been paying a blended rate, you might have had 1.35, you might have had upwards of 1.8% before. That was the rate that some people were paying. In the latest legislative session, this range expanded. It lowered to 0.76% and it went upwards of 2.2%. And everybody in this room is going to be somewhere different on this chart. Some might be paying 0.76%, some might be upwards of 2.19%. And then next year, 2026 is when the homestead exemption comes in. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions on that later. One thing I do want to add is that the homestead exemption concept is not new. There was a homestead exemption from, I believe, 1997 to 2014. It was just calculated differently, and it was for senior citizens 65 years and older who were in their properties for 7 months a year. So this is how the math works. This is it. If you're really focused on it, a lot of people are trying to figure out how to simplify this. I wish it could get simpler than this. It's pretty challenging because it is a relatively complicated formula. Right now, the tax bills that we did have, the millage rates that we did know last year were calculated like this. 1.35% of the market value of the land, plus 1.35% of the building value less than 1.5 million, plus 1.89%, it's expressed as 1.4 times the residential rate, over 1.5 million, which leads to that blended rate. Here's 2025, bottom left. 0.76% of the first 400,000 plus 1.1% of the value between 400,000 and 1.5 million. I'm sorry for all these numbers, but we just gotta say them because I know everyone's so curious about it. Quick note to say, it's just like income tax. If your home is valued over 1.5 million, that doesn't mean that it's 2.2% on the entire value of the home. It's only on the value that is over 1.5 million. And then next year it gets even more complicated because we've got two categories. We have the homestead exemption for non-primary residents who are not in their homes for 7 months a year at 1.9%. Just want to point out for folks who have very high-end value homes, they might have been paying a rate of 1.8% before, and it jumps to 1.9%, which is not as far as it fell, right, when we first heard that news. And then the resident gets an even more complicated one. I'm sorry, the bottom of this is cut off here, but 0.76% value up to the median. Do we know the median value? 378 is what I heard. Is that correct? So median is 378,000, 0.9% of the value between the median and 2x the median. And I'm going to go into all this stuff, but you can take a picture. 1.1% between twice the median and 4 times the median, and then 1.9% of the value over 4x the median. So we're going to do 2 home examples in Big Sky. One of them is going to be an example of how our taxable value goes up, and one is going to be going down. This is from the Montana Cadastral. This is a real property in Montana, in Big Sky, excuse me. So we saw these were the values in 2023 and 2024. It's separated based on land and building. Total is just the sum of these two, stuff without commas. But we went from roughly 3.2 million to 4.35 million. I assume there are a fair amount of people in the room who have felt something like this. 5 charts to look at. I'm going to start on the left side. So on the left side, the taxable value, remember the left side of the equation, in 2023, the last reappraisal cycle was about $50,000 on this property. In 2025, this jumped up, and we saw this on that thing that we just got mailed out, right? So it's a big change. The next 3 are really important. So jump from 50,000 to about 80,000 in taxable value, not taxes. 2026, if this person is a non-resident, they'll jump up again a little bit, 78,000 to 82,000. If they are a resident or a long-term renter, right, Sarah? Long-term renter, this will come down. And this last one that's interesting to me is what would have happened if the legislature hadn't changed anything. We're talking about 69,000 versus 65,000. It's not nothing. But for me, when I learned this, I just kind of calmed down a little bit when I was reacting to everything. Here's example B. And as it turns out, example B is for more than 50% of properties in Big Sky. More than 50% of properties in Big Sky saw their taxable value come down, which was a big surprise to me. I kind of didn't believe it until I did all the math. Here's how that works. In 2024, it was worth 1.6. Market value dropped to 1.5. Taxable value went from 22,000 to 15,000 1 year. If this person turns out to be a short-term rental or a non-resident, it will then nearly double next year. So I assume there's going to want to be a conversation about that later. If they're a resident, they'll go from 15,000 to 14,000, even less. And here's the interesting part, which is if the formula hadn't changed, this property would have a much higher taxable value in 2026. And in this change, I think we can understand at least what some people were going for with legislative changes was property tax relief. And there's an example of how it's happening in Big Sky. However, on the whole, as we know in this room, and we're feeling it, Big Sky has experienced extreme changes. And the next few slides are going to demonstrate that. As I show them to you, I just want you to remember that this is taxable value. It's pre-millage. We're going to get to that. So, this is the taxable value of Big Sky in 2014, 80 million. 2021 is 195, 2023, 374, 2025, 703, and I just learned this morning that it's actually slightly higher than that, but we basically got it. The blue number is the Gallatin County side of Big Sky, where we currently are. The red bars are the Madison County side, where the mountain is. We can see that the majority of this growth has happened on the Madison County side, especially in the last reappraisal cycle. This is dramatic, and when we compare it to the rest of the state, the story gets more interesting. So here's Big Sky on the left. Director Beatty was talking about the gold mines. This clearly indicates that. Here's Billings, Bozeman, Missoula. Now, what's really fascinating is the actual geographic area of Big Sky is about the same as other major cities. What's hard for me to compute and hard for us to understand is the population difference. 3,000 to 4,000 here versus over 100,000 Billings. And the next one is by county. So it turns out the growth of Big Sky has put us almost in line with all of Gallatin County. And it turns out that Gallatin County is the only local jurisdiction in the entire state, talking cities, counties, any taxing district, besides the state, that compares to us. So that tells a pretty dramatic story. This last year, from 2024 to 2025, we see the most change. I'm sorry for these numbers, but I wanted to figure out a way to show the whole state and to show the obvious outlier. It's like neighbor graphs, I think I've already made. So starting at Beaverhead to Yellowstone, this shows the change in total taxable value between 2024 and 2025. Oddly, Gallatin County went down, so that was a surprise. Yellowstone County went down, and of course, we know exactly where this is. This is Madison County. So when we talk about millage rates, and we talk about taxable value growing dramatically, the theory is that when the tax base grows significantly and the need for services does not increase at the same rate, millage should come down, theoretically. We're gonna try to project, we're gonna work through that, okay? This one is pretty intense as well. This is the change in taxable value from 2024 to 2025. Here's Big Sky, 312 million, that's the combination. There's Whitefish, Missoula, Bozeman, Billings. And then the entire state had a net gain of about 193 million. So this is an example of that balloon that Director Beatty was talking about earlier. I think, is that right? This is where the top of the balloon, I think. Okay. So market tax values saw dramatic changes. What about the mills and my taxes? You know, that's the big question. It's important to understand all that other stuff to get there, so we're all on the same page. Okay. So here we are. These are examples of, I would say, probably the average bill for the Madison County side of Big Sky and the Gallatin County side of Big Sky. Not every bill looks like this. It also doesn't include RIDs. I know there's an RID that's handling a fire station right now. So we've got to figure out a way to base compare all these. And we can draw a line. I'm not going to draw this line, sir, but we can see a trend. We all know that in 2023, the values skyrocketed, doubled in so many cases. And we saw the mills here on the Gallatin County side drop from 484 to 326. So we saw a little bit of that balancing act. In Madison County, it's less dramatic. Why? Why is that? It starts at a low rate. The reason why the Madison County side drops at a lower rate is probably because, so anyone can challenge me on this, we'll talk about it. The state mills, 95 mills for education, plus the 6 mills for the Montana University system, they have stayed the same. 95 mills have been there since 1989. Because the tax base is so enormous on the Madison County side, we're starting to get into the sub 200 area. And so the change is going to be less dramatic. Cool, we can talk more about this in a little bit, but I'm going to go out on a limb and try to make a guess. Because the Gallatin County did not go up significantly and went down, this mill number probably won't drop very much if you live in the Gallatin County side. I'm just going out on a limb saying it. If you live on the Madison County side, especially if you're outside of the Big Sky Fire District, you might see this number drop below 200 mills. Can't guarantee it. There are new things happening. The Ennis School District has a new maintenance project they're doing at school. The county is a new county courthouse or something, I think. So we don't know. We will know the answer to this when? In October. Because right now, this information, all that stuff that you saw in this last slide, that just came out. I've been talking to people at the Department of Revenue every day, waking up at 6 a.m., checking the certified values dashboard. We're trying to get the numbers as fast as we can before those AB 26 forms. Wow. But I feel pretty confident saying that for Madison County, we'll have less mills. Gallatin County, we probably won't see a big difference because of what happened at Acton. Okay. Two more slides. This is it. Here's what happened. And I think this is where we're all concerned. So market value of the median home on the Gallatin County side jumped from 500,000 in 2021 to 1.5 million in 2025, tripled. Taxes paid moved at a little bit slower rate. And this ETR at the bottom is effective tax rate. That's just the amount of taxes you actually pay divided by the market value of your home. Went from 0.71%, 0.46% down, we don't know, 300 to 400 mills. By the way, there are a lot of places around Montana that are paying 1,000 plus mills. So our mills are quite low, especially on the Madison County side. What's that?
It's all relative to the base. So.
I'll take that back. I hear you.
Okay.
And then on the Madison Valley side, these numbers are a little bit higher. That's not a surprise for us in the room. We went from 1.2 million to 4 million. The taxes paid, again, moving at a slower rate. But we're at 0.3%, 0.32%. I know that what I just heard is who cares when we're at that basis? And I think that's great for conversation. And this is the last slide I'm going to show you. Something I'm thinking about, which is what property tax rates look like across the nation from the Tax Foundation. So the high end, 1.83%. Wow. We were talking about 0.3% before. That's in Illinois. Montana's 0.6%, and we're sitting at the bottom. Now, on a very high-end home, 0.32% is still a lot of money, we get that. And I know there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had here, but this was helpful for me. And with that, we're gonna jump on the
So
conversation.
John, can I get this gal's comment on it's all relative to the base? You are partially correct. There's two pieces of that. Out where I'm at with 500 people in a small county and nothing in it for tax base, but farms and ranches. That's 100% correct. Where places like Missoula and Bozeman see these jumps, even with value increases, are all the voter approved mill levies. So, you know, like I tend to say, Missoula, their mill levy is over 1,000, Missoula County. And there's some people pretty upset about their tax bills. Well, turns out the free bus in Missoula ain't free. You know, that was a voted mill levy for however many bucks on your, per $100,000 your house, and the voters approved that. When you put a new roof on the 4-H barn at the fairgrounds, and you run a mill levy for it, a voter approved mill levy. That's the other piece of it, right? So in my county and nobody, we've got almost 700 mills. But it's not because we vote for a lot of stuff, it's just because somebody's gotta pay the bill. In places like Missoula, Bozeman, and one of the biggest ones are open space bonds. Missoula's got big on open space bonds, well, those are all voter approved. So, and actually, when you think about it, it's the coolest part about our system. When they designed the property tax system, it put your property taxes in your control at the local level. Now, I'm talking to a little bit different crowd than I normally do, because there's a whole bunch of people in here that probably aren't registered voters that have control, like we do in most other places in Montana. But it's the coolest thing about it is you can actually, if you don't like what your county commissioners did with the budget, you vote the bastards out. I mean, I share a fence line, two of mine. And sometimes they don't like what I did, and sometimes I don't like what they did, so we talk all the time. And if you don't want the library bond, don't vote for it. And so we actually are in control of our destiny almost everywhere. Like I said, here's a little bit different in many ways, because there's that divide between the rest of Madison County especially, and really Gallup, right? So that's the other piece of it, right? There's a base piece, and then it's a what we chose to do to ourselves piece. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so thank you for indulging me on how we're gonna do this third part of the conversation. I bet everybody has a question in this room, and we're gonna try to get all these questions asked, but we're gonna do it in a neighborhood style. So the first part of this is, earlier you talked to your neighbor, and I want you to turn to your neighbor right now and check in with them and say, what is still unresolved? What is something I'm really thinking about? What do I wanna know? And check in with them. After that, we're gonna have a short, small neighborhood conversation where you're gonna join a group, people behind you. And then once that conversation's happened, you can elect a representative from your neighborhood to ask the question of the director of the Department of Revenue, so that everybody's voice can be heard. Okay? Thank you so much. So first, you're gonna turn to your neighbor and say, what is still unresolved for you? Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was good. That kind of, that evolved organically. We're just gonna jump right into the questions here. Thank you. I see everyone's got a lot of questions. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Good. So. Good. I'm glad we're having a neighborhood conversation. Clearly a lot to talk about. So at this point, all we'll have is we'll have a raise of hands. I'm gonna start at the back. Then I'll make my way forward and I'll hand the mic over. Does that sound good to you, Director Beatty and Paula? Perfect. Cool. So we've had some conversation. Let's start on this side. Are there any questions in this area? There is. Okay, we have a question. Perfect. Here you go. Just speak to that mic.
So could you address why legislature changed the tax law in May? What was the driving force behind the formula that you described?
I'm elected when it gets to answer that one. And it's kind of a. Well, it's a tough one, but I'll tell you the story is the last appraisal cycle. In the post-COVID and Costner era, when everybody's rates or everybody's values went bananas, right? There was a big public outcry. A lot of local Montanans watched their values go way up. And then politics got involved. And I'm the worst politician in the world, if you haven't noticed. But what happened is the legislature has about 150 people in it. And I think 150 legislators campaigned on fixing that busted property tax system. And then my boss said, we're gonna fix that busted property tax system. The unfortunate part about it, frankly, was very few of those legislators understand as much about the property tax system as the people in this room do now. And that ain't no joke. So what we had is promises made on the campaign trail. And then, of course, momentum caught on. Something was gonna happen, right? And my boss wanted something to happen. The 150 legislators wanted something to happen. I was not involved personally, except screaming bloody murder about getting this thing stuffed down my throat and not having time to implement this thing. I'm told I can't use the word complex. Somebody got a thesaurus, what's the word for complex? It's complex. And so the only involvement we had was trying to say, you guys, how do we do this? Right? Because it's got a lot of complications, but I think it was a political momentum thing. And then a whole bunch of people went, oh gosh, this is hard. I thought it was gonna be easy. But once they made a promise, things rolled, and it was bipartisan. It was the only bill given to my boss. And that's how it got here. It was designed to encourage residency. So saying, hey, if you're on the fence and you got a place at Big Sky, why don't you file a resident tax return here? That'd be cool. And it was designed to encourage long-term rentals. Because what we had, I don't know if you saw as much at Big Sky, a lot of places in the state. A great example was we have these two young ladies that work for Paula up in Columbia Falls, and we're in our Kalispell office and they live in Columbia Falls. Somebody bought the house in the cul-de-sac in Columbia Falls. It was a long-term rental and turned it into an Airbnb, and they were living in campers. So there was an encouragement. They were trying to encourage long-term rental, which is why you see the lower rate on long-term rentals versus the Airbnb thing, and trying to encourage residency. And then there's that other piece of, well, let's tax without representation, and that will be probably a few people in this room. Again, that wasn't us. That was a legislative act. It was the only thing given to my boss, and everybody with the political momentum had something was gonna get signed. I seem to remember somebody said that once about the Obamacare. Let's just sign it and see how this goes. So. There you have it. Is that enough for you? Great, thank you.
Okay, and now I'm in the back right. I'm gonna make my way down the aisle. Everyone's gonna get a chance. Is there anybody in this section that has a question? Yes, ma'am.
I have not received, we have not received ours yet, our assessment. So I have been calling, because everybody I know did, and somebody said, looked it up, said, well, it wasn't done, call back in a week, which I'm trying. But I'm worried about the timeline on filing my clarification. So I just wondered, will it be 30 days from when I get it?
I'm concerned that you haven't gotten it because all of them have been mailed. So if you haven't received it, I'm gonna give you my email address and you can email me directly.
Because your employee said it hadn't been sent out.
Where, can I ask where you're from?
Where we, here,
Right here in Big Sky.
Yeah.
I don't, there's no reason for that I can think of. And so, I'll give you my personal email address. I'll give it to everybody. It's pgilbert@mt.gov. It's very easy. If you haven't received your assessment notice, please let me know right away. We'll send that, keep the envelope, because the postmark on that envelope is when your 30 days starts. So we will absolutely honor that. You got it, no? P Gilbert, so PGILBERT @mt.gov. You bet.
We've got another one in the back here.
Yep, next question.
Yes, you mentioned that non-resident property tax is gonna go up for 2026. It was on one of the little charts over there that, it had a big bar. What's the actual valuation of that, like, percentage wise?
I'm not sure I understand your question. The actual valuation percentage, you know, okay, go for it.
Well, what I think you mean is for 2026, if you don't qualify for the homestead, which means that you can qualify for the homestead if the property is your primary residence that you live in for at least 7 months out of the year. Okay, if that's not your property, if you own 2 properties, or if you have a short-term rental, the tax rate will be 1.9%.
From what?
1.9% is what is applied to the market value of your property to arrive at the taxable value. Then that taxable value is multiplied by the mills. Once those are set, that will give you your general tax that's owed.
How does that differ from the resident?
So for next year, if you qualify for the homestead exemption or the long-term rental, then what you're gonna get is you're gonna get the tiered tax rates. So similar to what we have this year, except different, because we need to make it a little bit more complicated just to keep everybody on their toes. So this year we have 3 tax rates that are applied. Next year, if you are qualified for that homestead, then what John talked about, that median value. So if your house value is up to 378,000, that portion is taxed at 0.76%. Then it goes to 2 times the median, I believe. The tax rate jumps to 0.9%. Then it's 2 to 4 times the median. Again, we're trying to simplify this for all of you to understand. You can see how well this is going. 2 to 4 times then is taxed at 1.1%, and anything above 4 times is taxed at 1.9%.
Do you have nightmares about numbers?
Yes. And I will tell you that Brendan and I live and breathe this every single day. And yesterday we were talking about it. We're like, oh wait, no. This is not easy for any of us. And so again, yes, thanks for asking the questions, because it doesn't make sense to most of us at this point.
Jump into the front of the room now, or last.
How easy is it to prove that you're a resident? Is there a box that you check? How do you verify that?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's a good one. Actually, we're still working on trying to figure out how to do that, because that's 26. And they stuffed 25 on me with a month and a half notice. So we just got this stuff out the door. I just am starting to try to figure out, I don't, if I have my way, which by the way, I'm a pretty small fish in the who gets their weight on. I will make it as simple as I can possibly get away with for 2 reasons. 1, we work for you and it should be simple. And B, if it's really hard, how the hell are we gonna? So it's two prongs to give me support for trying to make it as easy as possible.
Let me give it the math. It's really simple.
Whoa, no, you didn't raise your hand.
Gonna be up to you, but I'm gonna go here first, because we're bouncing around the room. I'm sorry?
Coming.
Oh, we're coming, don't worry. Keeping you on your toes, we're doing it, but here you go.
So as more like community land trusts and affordable housing becomes or is built throughout the state. How will you guys look at that? And I'm an owner of a property that's on a community land trust, so I only see 2% simple appreciation a year for my property. Will that be taken into consideration since we can't sell at market value?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's one I don't have the answer to off the top of my head. I apologize.
And I will tell you too, that those are very unique and they're fairly new. And so I'd love to give you a direct answer, but I'm afraid I would misspeak. We do take that into consideration and we are watching. They do not appreciate at the same rate simply because of what you just said. And so we do track those and we are adjusting simply for that a difference that's put in part of the contract, I believe is what it is.
The ground lease itself, so
Right.
what dictates the resale is what tells you.
Right, and so we do let those values go up by that 2% or whatever it is by year.
And I just wanna say that you will receive several from my community because they didn't. And just, that's why I wanted to ask the question, because all my neighbors.
Interesting, and I will tell you this, and I'm not making excuses. I love that because we may not even know that that's what's going on there, so that's great, thank you.
Of course,
I
as you
appreciate
explained
that.
it all, I'm like, oh, it's a clarification form, so you'll get lots of them from Meadowview.
That's okay, we can deal with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all right, to the middle, I'm gonna come back to the front and the back, don't worry, remember to ask quick questions and try to avoid a follow-up if we can, so that we can get to everybody.
Okay, I have two questions on the homestead exemption. How do you apply for that? Is there information on that?
So if you qualify for the rebate, the property tax rebate, window is now open to apply for that. If you apply for that and you do not have a change in ownership between now and the first of next year, or if the residence is no longer your primary residence, if you receive the rebate, you automatically qualify for the homestead exemption next year. If you don't, the window to apply for the homestead or the long-term rental will open up December 1st and run through March 1st. Again, that's all in development stages right now.
Okay,
We do have a website, it's called homestead.mt.gov. That's gonna be where the most up-to-date information is, but we don't even have the application available yet, so.
okay, thank you. No follow-up question to that. I have another independent question. And it goes to the first one that was asked about how did this all come about? And you had mentioned that they were trying to encourage people becoming residents, which I can understand. But for Big Sky, right? Like Big Sky is a resort community. It is all about people coming into town on a temporary basis to enjoy what we have to offer. So was that not considered?
You've been around the Montana legislature? Probably not, to be honest. Probably not, but somebody might have. It was a rush job at the last minute.
We're gonna kill the resort industry is what we're going to do.
I hope not.
It will.
You
Yeah, not your fault.
probably saw, my little history discussion there. Montana has a history of shooting at the goose.
Okay, here we go.
This is a question for Paula, about Orion, your mass appraisal system. I know from looking at Montana cadastral, there's all kinds of characteristics for every property. I'd like to know where I can find out how those characteristics are weighted in your mass appraisal system. Do you have some publicly available information that tells us how that system works?
If you contact your local office, wherever that is, if it's Ennis, if it's Bozeman, any of the local offices, an appraiser can sit down and go through the modeling information with you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Griffith.
Thank you. This is a question that I get from clients. I'm also a real estate appraiser or attorney, and so I deal with these issues a lot. If any of you have questions about what was considered, please know that Big Skies, their thoughts were considered. I was very active in making people consider them, but it didn't mean that I persuaded as many people as we needed. But that being said, one of the questions I get is, if you have a property that has two homes on it, one is your permanent residence, but the other one is your vacation rental, are you going to split those properties, or are you going to do them as one tiered? And I apologize for the tiers. If you look at my website, I'm on one tax. All right.
So here's what I can tell you, I don't know. It goes back to the yes question, we have no idea. And here's why, is because it's still in the development stage. We have so many unique situations in Montana that we don't know. We have commercial buildings that have, you know, a condo above it. And so how are we gonna apply the tax rates to that? What if you have a duplex and one side, this is their primary residence and they qualify? How do we divide that land then? How are we gonna handle all these unique situations? And again, that's all in discussions right now because it's just a lot. So we'll be working through those in the next few months.
Question, and Alana, that is a great question. Funny you should ask, because nobody asked us at all how that thing was gonna go. And you may have probably heard me screaming at a whole room full of them saying, if you stuff this down my throat, you're gonna get C work at best. And I was told C's get degrees. That's how this thing went. I didn't have white hair before this past session, so.
Yeah, maybe I got too far into the weeds on this, but I took a look at my numbers and did some calculations. And on our property, we have three categories. One is unqualified ag, the improvements, and then the building stuff. And what I discovered was an unqualified ag taxable valuation went up 5%. The improvements went up 14%. The building site went up 58%. I was very confused. In fact, I spent more than an hour with one of your staff members on it. The best we could conclude is that the last piece that's assessed in that have the various levels of taxation is the property. So that is the building side. So if your building is worth more than 1.5 million, you're gonna pay 2.2% taxable value on that. If on the same acre of land, you have $100,000 mobile home, you're gonna get taxed first. 300 will be at 0.75 and the second one at 1.1. How is that right?
I guess, let's break that question down just a little bit because I think you lost me at some point.
And would that be a better one to sit down at the table with?
Okay.
That's such a specific, unless that's a burning question for everybody else in the room. But let's address that with you, okay?
I'm happy to sit.
But we can do it ourselves.
I did the numbers, it didn't make sense.
I will explain it to you and we'll get to an answer.
Perfect. So after this question and answer, there is gonna be informal time. I'm gonna keep moving through. I did promise to come back up here.
And we're staying here as long as anybody wants to talk, so.
First, I want to just say thank you guys both for doing this. It's not easy and we all appreciate it. I know no one said that so far, but thank you. So Paula, when you look at the appraised value, we live in neighborhoods where people generally see what transactions have taken place within communities that are definable. And you're not seeing anything that remotely looks similar in land value assessment on a bill. No comp at a land price that sold that number of similar size. Second, no home price is sold at a similar number within this 22 to 24 time frame that we're talking about. What you recommend is that we fill out the forms and do the process and push back on that from a formal process standpoint.
I absolutely do. Because What I want you to understand is where we came up with those numbers. If there's an error on our end, we certainly want to correct that. If it's also just educating you on, well, here's how the process actually works and here's what we looked at, we'll sit down and show you everything. Everything that we do is transparent. And so we'll walk you through that, explain it. If it still doesn't make sense and you say, that's not what my property is worth, please file the form.
Okay, so how does that interaction take place? Cause we fill out the forms, do we then get to dialogue?
Yes,
That's-
so
Okay.
here's what happens. Right now, we have about 5,000 AB 26 forms that we've taken in across the state. That's a whole heck of a lot. When we have, probably 160 some appraisers out there, it's gonna take time. So all of those they're entered in the computer system. You can apply online, you can submit a paper copy. As we process those, they'll be sent to each appraiser who works a particular area. And eventually somebody's gonna contact you and say, hey, you filed this appeal, let's talk about it. And let's set up a time for me to come over and review the property. You can also go into your local office anytime and say, could somebody please sit down with me and walk through some of this information? And we're happy to do that as well.
And then
We're gonna keep moving on to the next.
one last
That's
follow-up.
three, okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Going forward, you're also gonna have comps in some of these communities up here because of the resort where a property comes with access to things that has nothing to do with just the physical value of the home. And some of those are part of the deal and some of those aren't. How do you factor that going forward?
So again, that's how we're breaking it down by neighborhood. So we are looking at all of those things. If you live in an area where you have, you have access to this clubhouse or you have amenities that other people don't have, we're gonna try and find comparables that come from that area. That's the only good comparables that we can find. If we can't, we're gonna start looking outside of there. And so again, it's gonna go back to which variables have we used that we're applying to find comparable properties? And then working with you, if you come in and say, that's not comparable to my property at all, then we can either, one of two things, we can either explain to you why we believe it is comparable, or we can say, that's a great point. Let's talk about that and let's look at some other things here.
And if I could give you a little example, there's probably more than one person in this room that just had an adjustment that we made, a significant adjustment on that very issue. Forever, the department was under the mistaken impression that a certain subdivision was inside one of the clubs and had access to all this other stuff. Well, it turns out that's not correct. And once we changed and we took that piece, that number of homes and separated from those amenities, there was a marked difference in value. And we reassessed all of those, redid them. Now we know. We had never known if the AB 26 hadn't been filed. And it had been around forever. Nobody knew that the map carved out this little bird that was named very similar to the rest of these little birds, or little cul-de-sacs and what have you. So we do, that's what the AB 26 is for, and it works.
okay, so we're gonna do 3 more questions in this format. And then after that, there's gonna be an opportunity, Director Beatty and Ms. Gilbert are gonna be ready for you all to have conversations with them. And then the fun doesn't end there. Tomorrow night, we've been working on this. They will be available for a conversation, more informal conversation at the farmer's market from 5 to 7 p.m. in the New Arts Council building. And that was just organized because of how many of you are here tonight. We know that not all the questions are gonna get answered, but we're gonna do 3 more. We're gonna start with Linda.
I don't believe that the 2024 valuation date is fair, at least not where I live. Our property values have come down considerably since that date, and I'm going to pay a much higher value than I should. And another thing you brought up, Paula, that I thought was a really good point is there are almost no comparables. So we have 2 houses that sold overpriced in the time frame that you're looking at. Plus you've got that to fund.
So, and that's more a comment than a question, but you get to talk to Alana about that, because that's a legislative prerogative. We're following the rules. Right? I mean, that's how we have to do it. I don't get to say, yeah, that sucks. It's not fair. I get to ignore it because the legislature gets really pissed off if I don't do what they tell me. So that's really the catch to that. That is how that is set up.
And that valuation date is truly in statute. It is said. And here's the great thing is it used to be 6 years. And so, you went 6 years and continued to see that increase. They changed that to the 2 years to catch these changes in the market much quicker. So if you remember back in 2008, we had a little bit of a crash. And, but you got your 2009 assessment and it was based on sales that occurred when everything was increasing, and that's what you paid on for the next 6 years. That's when we switched to the 2-year cycle. So it's not to your advantage right now, but it was to your advantage when our assessment date was 1/1/22 and the market was continuing to climb. And so, you were taxed at what it was worth on 1/1/22, but everybody knows that the market went nuts. And so values continue to climb, but you paid on what it was worth that date. 2 years later, we have a little bit of the reverse happening. But again, that's why we're on the 2-year cycle. So all of the sales that are occurring now where you're saying, gosh, they're selling for less, the market is declining, it's slowing, all of those things. Those sales will be reflected in your valuation for the next tax cycle, which will include 27 and 28, with an assessment date of 1/1/26.
Two questions left.
Thank you. I guess I think I understand the homestead portion. If you have a home and you're a resident. And I think you talked about potentially that you had the same kind of scenario. If you have a second home somewhere, say on a ranch, then you go out to the ranch, do whatever. So one of these is your primary, one of them is the place that you go to whatever you do. So can you explain, is that then go to the flat 1.9% evaluation, or how does that work if you're a resident?
Sure, cause I've got this. Now, ranch is different. Ag steads have their own thing. So if it's a home on qualified agricultural land, it's at 1.34%. Whether you're resident, non-resident, whatever, if it's on qualified ag land. Now, where I'm gonna take it is, I'm a resident and I bought a Black Eagle with it every dime I ever made in Montana. And I'm gonna be, if I choose to go skiing there, I'm gonna pay second home rate. Because that's obviously not on qualified ag land. But yeah, if you got a ranch, it's 1.34. Which is, sort of good. I've got employee housing, 4 employee houses on my place. That I'm gonna pay 1.34 on, but the homes in the county seat and Winnet are gonna pay much less. So it got shifted onto me, which I didn't really dig very much, but I didn't have any say. I didn't pay my $15 to be a legislator. So. You gotta pay $15, right, Lana, to enter up. And by the way, entering up with that $15 means you're taking on a big job, and she deserves applause for taking that on, you guys.
Okay, the last question, she promises it'll be simple to Michelle.
It's a homestead exemption question. When I purchased my house and I'm a full-time resident, I purchased my home in myself and my husband's name and filed a homestead exemption. Through the years, we ended up changing that into a trust. Do we need to file a new homestead exemption because it's owned in a trust now and not our names?
I would say yes, and you gotta be careful, because there's 2 kinds of trusts, irrevocable and revocable, and I screw this up every time. Paula, don't screw it up.
I will not. If the ownership is in a revocable trust, you can apply for the homestead and it will be granted. If your residential property is in an irrevocable trust or in an LLC, it does not qualify. It can qualify for the long-term rental, but not for the primary residence. I'm gonna let Brendan answer that.
That's one of those things we're trying to figure out, but it's another one of those details in here that kind of double sucks, especially at a place like Big Sky, where a huge number of homes are held in an entity, like an LLC or an S corp, you don't get a rebate on that, even if you're living in the thing year round and filing as a Montana taxpayer. If you're holding it in an LLC, for example, and the last time we did rebates, my phone blew up. Every cowboy I know in the state flew off the handle on me because LLCs didn't get a rebate. Even though all of my friends and neighbors live in a home owned by the ranch entity. Nobody got their $600. Boy, did I hear about that? And we're gonna see this with this, especially here, right? Because a lot of these homes are held in an entity. And even if you're living in it full time, you won't get it as your homestead. But again, I got that handed to me.
What about leasing it?
Leasing it for 7 months, and that would make it a long-term rental. The question. That we're just in the beginning stages of saying, all right, how do we administer that? I mean, do I really wanna be the rent cop? I don't. Do I really want Department of Revenue people deciding if this is a real lease or not? No. I don't know how, you guys, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, frankly. But I have the very best, I've got this, the crew that works for Paula are the very, very best. We'll find a way to get it. And it will have bumps in it, everybody. This thing is imperfect, but almost all legislation is imperfect. And we're gonna have to work through it, and you guys, best thing you can do is make phone calls to your elected people and talk to them about these things. That's the coolest thing about our system, is we actually do have a say in how this works. And I encourage you to exercise your say in how this works.
Thank you very much. That's where we're gonna end this section of the questions. If you do have more questions, I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody. Brendan and Paula, big thanks for you all coming to this time tonight. Thank you. Yeah, you stick around tomorrow night from 5 to 7 at Yards Council Building, and a big thanks to the Big Sky Chamber of Commerce for putting on this evening. Thank you very much for coming.
I didn't get to compliment you. You kicked me off too soon. Hey, great work. All right, I promised this guy I'd talk to. I was gonna steal it.
John, can I grab you for a 20-second post?
Yeah.
These rates shown on the internet. The breakdown, where did you get it from?
Oh, well, where you can go, probably the best place is the Montana Department of Revenue website. If you just Google search Montana Department of Revenue, that's where I got all my data from.
Okay.
And there's some really good stuff from our local, like Alana, do you know Alana Griffith, our representative? She spoke. She and Cora Newman have been putting together some really great materials that show it. But I love the Department of Revenue website. And really, yeah,